Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into an intense and emotional story about love, betrayal, and the painful journey of self-discovery. Join me as we explore the life of Mark, a man who thought he had it all, until one shocking revelation turned his world upside down. Stick around, because this tale of heartache and resilience is one you won't want to miss. Let's get started. It was like something out of a Norman Rockwell painting, all idyllic family life. Of course, this picture wouldn't fly on the cover of the Post. Trish, my mother-in-law, stood to the left of the hospital bed, my own mom on the right. Both of them were just gushing over the bed's occupants, Sarah and her day-old baby. Now, newborns? Not usually cute, but try telling that to parents and grandparents, right? Still, watching them, I had to admit, this little girl wasn't half bad. At least the blotches on her face had faded to a light pink, that waxy coating they're born with all washed away. Even her head was rounding out nicely. I figured given time, she might even resemble a woman. Sarah, my wife of 6 years, the supposed love of my life. Sarah sat on the bed, and I stepped aside as a nurse from maternity and another woman knocked, then entered. "His is Ms. Daniels from administration," the nurse, her name escaped me, said. "I am bringing the birth certificate application for you to fill out." The thought flashed through my mind, anywhere else, this would be nuts. A woman practically nursing a baby while folks discussed paperwork? But here, in the hospital, it was just routine. "Take your time, honey, finish feeding the baby," Sarah told Ms. Daniels. "When you've got a minute, just fill in the blanks. Our records have most of it, right? Birth date, place. We'll need your and your husband's full names, maiden name, age, that kind of thing. Take your time, we'll file it all with the court for you. Copy of the birth certificate comes in the mail in a couple weeks." Ms. Daniels turned and left. "Here ya go. Hun, fill this out. I'm a little tied up at the moment," Sarah offered with a smile I didn't return. "Nah, I think I'll let you handle it later, when you're less busy," I replied. "Besides, maybe we should wait for the DNA test results first. Find out if I'm actually the father." If this were a movie, you'd have heard that record scratch sound effect right then. Everything stopped. And for you folks born in the digital age, a record's this vinyl disc. Never mind. Point is, to say my audience was shocked is an understatement. 3 out of 4 women just stared at me, mouths hanging open. Trish was the first to recover. "Are you out of your mind? Why would you even think that?" She looked at Sarah, whose face went from surprised to confused to downright pissed. "How dare you accuse me of sleeping with someone else? What kind of woman do you think I am?" She tried to force a smile. "Oh, I get it. April Fools. You're joking, right? Mark, really, that's not funny, you should know better." Her body language said it all, though. She was shocked. I stood up, looking right at her. "Oh, I'm not joking. Not one bit." I said it coldly. "There's a good chance I'm not the father," I finished, ice in my voice. "How could you even think I'd cheat? Have I ever given you the slightest reason? Name one time, where I acted like I was seeing someone else." Deny. And she almost pulled it off too, I'll give her that. Keep a straight face and everything. I turned to Trish. "Maybe I should grab the car seat from my car. Let you two head home this afternoon. I'm sure Sarah could use you around for a while. I know, you and Mom offered to help out, and we said we had it covered. But, she could use the help. Since I won't be there." I turned to leave, but a sharp command stopped me in my tracks. "Hold it right there, Mark Thomas Finley." "Mom," the ice in her voice could have chilled a beer. "You don't get to drop a bomb like that and just walk away." Like the dutiful son I was raised to be, I stopped dead and turned back. While I figured out what to say next, Mom and Trish just looked back and forth between me and Sarah, who'd started up with the waterworks. Full on sobbing now. "You can't leave, not with a little baby. He's our baby, you're her daddy." I answered Sarah first, then my mom. "I know I'm supposed to be a daddy. But am I? There's a difference." Mom poked me in the chest, hard, then grabbed my shirt, pulling me close. She stared me dead in the eyes, the same way she did when I was a kid. What the hell is going on with you, Mark? Why are you acting like a complete moron all of a sudden? You can't possibly doubt you're gonna be a father, that ship has sailed. You've been over the moon ever since Sarah told us she was pregnant. Hell, you've been reading all those baby books, putting together the crib, the changing table, and painting that whole nursery pink and yellow with those little animals everywhere. Every week, it's a new toy. Hell, some of him, she won't even use him, till she's walking. She finally took a breath, still looking right at me. So what's different now? I had a revelation, right there in that hospital room. I'm not so in tune with the program anymore, Mom. I'm sure you've all noticed. Trish shot up from her chair. Yeah, we've noticed, Mark. We all noticed you haven't held a baby, not once. Barely even looked at him up close. We figured the reality of it all was sinking in, you know? Becoming a dad. Anger welled up inside me. If this baby is mine, I'm gonna step up. Gonna be the best damn dad I can be. I said it with so much force they both took a step back. I wanted to be a dad. That was the plan. Until last week. Until I found out I might not be a dad. Well, I'm not sticking around for someone else's kid. Not raising. 3 voices overlapped, almost a single word. What? I'll support the child. If she's mine. If not, Chad Anderson can take care of his own kid. The name hit Sarah like a slap. Chad? We never did anything. We never slept together. How can you even say that? Mom and Trish were exchanging looks, confused, then back to me as I retreated to the foot of the bed. You're seriously gonna deny it? After a 6-month affair? You only broke up with him 7 months ago when you found out you were pregnant. He told you not to tell me, right? Said maybe it was my kid. We didn't, and anyone who says differently is a liar. Sarah was shouting now. Who told you this? Who's spreading these lies about my daughter? Trish demanded. I ignored her, looking straight at Sarah. Chad Anderson himself. Chad would never. He promised. Sarah practically shrieked. You could tell she was running on fumes, after the delivery and all. But she sounded sincere. Trish's head whipped back and forth between us. Someone needs to start explaining things. Now. I waited a beat, then looked at Sarah. He confessed everything. Told me all about it. In between the sobs, that is. I added, nastier than I meant. He was doing just fine yesterday, by the way. Called to check on you and the baby. He wouldn't. He was fine yesterday. Sarah's voice trailed off. Even stressed and sleep-deprived, she must have realized what she'd just said. We all heard it. Trish flinched. Even Mom, usually so quick to jump in, just stood there with her eyes wide. So you're still talking to your ex-boyfriend? I asked, each word measured. Given you any more advice? Encouragement? You know, on how to keep me in the dark about the fact that he might be a father? That set her off again. Full-on sobbing, loud enough that 2 nurses came rushing in. We were so careful. No one could have known, no one. I turned to the first nurse. We're just discussing names. For the birth certificate. She looked at me, then at Sarah, clearly picking up on something. My tone, maybe. Well, she seems to think my name should be on it. I said, trying to keep my cool. But I'd like to wait and see if I'm actually the father. Or if it's the guy she had the affair with. The nurse's face changed. It had clicked. She switched to full-on Sarah comfort mode. All right, Ms. Finley, let's try to stay calm. Deep breaths, just like during labor, okay? I will get you something to help you relax, but let's try it naturally first, all right? Deep breaths, with me. I watched as the nurse calmed Sarah down. I didn't even notice Mom and Trish getting closer. Chelsea Watkins? Know her? Mom nodded. She had to. Chelsea and Sarah had worked at the same office for years. Chelsea and her husband, Scott, were in our circle. We'd hung out plenty. Seems Chad had quite the effect on Chelsea. Almost talked her into a little hotel rendezvous. Trish looked surprised, but Mom's eyes widened. Gossip traveled fast. She got cold feet, though. Figured Chad couldn't keep his trap shut, that Scott would find out. To prove he was a regular vault, Chad started bragging about his past. How should I put it? Conquests? Hookups? Anyway, dropped a few names, enough detail that she believed him. Then he asked if she'd heard about any others, not his official girlfriends, but women at the office, married or single, didn't matter to him. Mom made a disgusted sound. Even Trish looked a little green. I continued. Of course, she hadn't heard anything, so to really prove his discretion, he names a few women from work. Before Sarah, there was Sandy, but she broke it off after a few months. Her husband was getting suspicious. Then you, Sarah. 6 months worth. He told Chelsea you broke up with him when you found out you were pregnant, hoping like hell I was the father. Said he didn't want to keep seeing you once there was a baby involved. He told Chelsea it was vital I never found out, because then you'd be out on your ear, and he didn't want to get stuck paying child support. And you, Sarah? You were so damn thrilled about the pregnancy, telling everyone at work the second you knew. I left out the part where she didn't seem to care whose kid it was. Like she figured I'd be so happy, so clueless, I just accepted, forgive her. She had another thing coming. His next conquest was Lauren Riley. Her husband was getting suspicious about her being late to work all the time, covering her tracks. She was even late picking up their kid from daycare. Then things cooled off with Lauren, so he went back to buttering up Chelsea. Like I said, smooth talker. Kept his little harem happy, ready for more. For months. Trish and Mom stared at Sarah, then back at me. Why would Chelsea say anything? Mom asked, her voice bewildered. Wasn't on purpose. Let's just say, Chelsea likes to talk. A lot. Apparently she slipped up during. I hesitated. Let's just say things got a little heated, and she called out his name. Scott overheard, started grilling her, and it all came spilling out. Scott's not like Chad, not at all. But he knew about Chad's reputation. He put 2 and 2 together, and got 16. He told me later he got right in her face. I glanced at Trish, afraid she'd blow a gasket again. Dan, Lauren's husband, was there too. Scott was kinda worried about him. The cop, might say something he shouldn't about what he'd do to his wife. But Chelsea, she decided to come clean. Smart lady. Scott's a stand-up guy, told me straight up, Mark, I just had to let you know, you might not be the father. Said he'd want someone to do the same for him. I told him he could count on it. We sat there for a while, just thinking about what a piece of work Chad was. Truth be told, if he is this baby's father, he can have her. And he can kiss his sorry ass goodbye if he thinks he's getting away with not paying child support. I said, the anger bubbling up again. He'll find out real quick what happens if he doesn't do right by this kid. Scott just shook his head. He might not have much left to worry about down there, from what I hear. I was gonna go straight to her husband, David, right? Didn't know him as well as you and Dan, but I vaguely remembered him from high school. Dude had a temper, figured he might do something stupid, too quick, We agreed to hold off, to give Sarah a chance to have the baby in peace. No need to add to the stress. Dan was ready to blow a gasket too. But he agreed to keep quiet for a bit. For you, mostly. Now that baby was here, the charade was over. Time to lay it all out for Mom and Trish. I gave them the short version, figuring they didn't need all the gory details about Sarah's extracurricular activities. They appreciated that, I could tell. Mom and Trish steered me out into the hallway, probably so Sarah wouldn't hear us. The other nurse wheeled the baby out, off to the nursery for a bit. How are you so calm? Mom asked, her voice hushed. Don't get me wrong, I can see you're upset. Just not as much as I expected. Had a while to process it, I guess. I said, which was mostly true. I could tell it calmed her down a little. Okay, you've had time to think. So, what are you gonna do? Mom always knew me too well. When are you getting the DNA test done? Trish asked. Already taken care of. Talked to the head nurse yesterday, right after the birth. Since we're married, I'm considered the intended father, so I didn't need Sarah's permission or anything. Trish looked genuinely surprised. Paid extra for the rush results, should know in a couple days. Paid extra for the rush results, should know in a couple days. So. Trish hesitated, choosing her words carefully. Think you can forgive Sarah? You know, even if you're not, even if the baby isn't yours? She said, baby, not Chloe, and I knew she was hoping against hope. Trish wasn't naive, she knew me pretty well. But she was holding on to something. One glance at Mom told me she knew exactly what I was thinking. And she didn't like it one bit. Honestly, I'm not sure I can just forget it, even if I am the father, I admitted. I'd had over a week to stew on it, and the anger hadn't gone away, just simmered down to a dull burn. This wasn't a drunken mistake, a one-night stand. This was 6 months. I can't trust her, not after this. The disrespect. For me, for our marriage. My voice was getting tight. She knew it was risky, getting knocked up by that jerk, especially when we were trying to have a baby. Telling everyone we'd decided to start a family. The fact that she kept seeing him, even then, means she didn't give a damn which one of us was the father. Have you thought about counseling? Marriage counseling? Mom asked. I knew she was trying to get ahead of the curve, stop Sarah's family from ganging up on me. And, Mark, you have to think about that little girl, she added, softer now. It's not her fault. She needs a father. Even if you aren't her biological father, you can still be her dad. Mom, counseling isn't gonna fix this. What's the point? I just want to know what I did wrong. There had to be something, right? Something to make her cheat. It's not like she was trying to replace me or anything. Chad's got a reputation. He wasn't gonna put a ring on it, and I'm sure Sarah knew that. I bit back the other words, the ones calling Chad every name in the book. Didn't want to upset Mom and Trish any more than I already had. It's just sex, right? Fun? We were happy, or so I thought. I was thrilled about the baby. Then last week, bam, my whole world blew up. Now, honestly, part of me hopes I'm not the father. The look on their faces, pure shock. Then I don't have to do this part-time dad thing. Frankly, I don't even know if I can stand to be around. I trailed off, the image of Sarah's betrayal seared into my brain. Frankly, I don't even know if I can stand to be around Sarah. Even if the baby is mine. Just for that, I'd need therapy. Right on cue, one of the nurses popped out of Sarah's room. Mr. Finley, your wife would like to speak with you. She knows you're still here, otherwise her mother would be back by now. I could tell she felt for me, or at least pitied my situation. But as I went to walk past, she stopped me. If you're going back in there, sir, try to stay calm, all right? I know this is a lot, but try not to upset her. We'd rather not give her anything to settle down, not if she's being discharged this afternoon. Besides, we don't want anything unnecessary getting into her milk. You know how important that colostrum is for the baby's immune system. I just nodded. She'd played me, appealing to my better nature, such as it was, even if the baby wasn't mine. Go talk to her, honey, Mom said, surprisingly gentle. Trish and I are gonna grab some coffee. Here, take the car keys, we'll switch the car seat later. She paused. Oh, and Mark, on your way out? Stop by the nursery. Take a good look at the baby. I really think he looks like you did at that age. Wishful thinking, Mom, or seeing what you want to see? I asked, unable to keep the bitterness out of my voice. She just shrugged, but I could tell she wasn't happy. Not one bit. I knew if I was the father, she'd be there, helping raise the baby, whether I stayed with Sarah or not. She'd wanted this as much as I had. Maybe more. Part of her still hadn't accepted that it might not happen. I pushed open the door to Sarah's room. The second she saw me, the waterworks started up again. You must hate me, she sobbed. Hate you? No, that's the problem. I hate what you did. And I'm so damn angry I can barely see straight. I said it as calmly as I could, which wasn't very. Part of me wanted to just slap her and walk out. If it wasn't for the tiny chance the baby was actually mine. I would have, but I needed answers. Look, do you even want to talk right now? Or do you need a few more days to work on your story? I asked, unable to hide the bitterness in my voice. I don't need a few days. Sarah began, but I cut her off. Yeah? Well, you've had 9 months to think about what you'd say if I ever found out about you and Chad. Chad goddamn Anderson. I growled, taking a deep breath to keep from yelling. I didn't think about him being the father, not really. It was you, I was having our baby, not his. Our baby? I might be the father, Sarah, but it's doubtful. Even I could hear how angry I sounded. To her credit, she looked surprised. Come on, Sarah. First week of July, when you supposedly got pregnant? I was offshore. On the rig. Most of the week, anyway. Didn't get back till the end. I double-checked my schedule, just to be sure. Yeah, I remember. We made up for lost time when I got home. But I was gone for most of it. And I sure as hell didn't know Chad was picking up my shifts. She started to protest, but I cut her off again. So, the weeks before that, right up until I got off that helicopter. He was at the house, wasn't he? Sleeping in our bed, while I was busting my ass to pay for that house, that car you love so much. No, he never came to the house. Just for barbecues, with everyone from work. We were careful, we wouldn't risk the neighbors seeing. Careful? You weren't careful enough not to get pregnant. And Chad? Chad's the kinda guy who takes risks. Gotta win, no matter what. I took a deep breath. I got tested for STDs last week. Suggest you do the same. It was part of my checkup. Early pregnancy, She mumbled. Don't think that's standard procedure. I replied, surprised. Told my doctor I wanted to be sure you didn't pick anything up on my business trip. She just frowned, embarrassed. It pissed me off that she'd let her doctor think I was the one cheating, not owning up to it. Like it was my fault. Let's start with this. Why? Why him, Sarah? And why the risk? Why not go back on the pill, say you wanted to wait before having a kid? Then you could screw around all you wanted without the risk. I was trying so hard not to yell, but it was getting harder by the second. I was lonely, Mark. You were gone all the time. Then Chad showed up, and we started talking, and one thing led to another, and you were screwing him behind my back. I get it. I said, cutting her off again. So, you started seeing him before we even stopped using protection? You were using spermicide? That's it? Not exactly the most reliable method. Well, yeah, I thought it was the best way. How about keeping your legs closed? I muttered, disgusted. Sarah looked like I'd slapped her. Good, maybe now she'd take me seriously. I had more questions, and I wasn't leaving until I got some answers. So, let me get this straight. You were cheating on me for 4 months before you got pregnant, and kept going for another 2 after? Sarah just nodded, staring at her hands. I suspected I was pregnant, but I didn't want to stop, not until I was sure. I figured, if I was already. She trailed off, shamefaced. Rationalized it? I asked, my voice sharp. I heard you tell our moms that Chad broke up with you. True? Didn't want to risk getting caught, having to pay up if it was his kid? She nodded miserably. We talked about it, yeah. We both figured you'd never suspect. The odds were good it was yours, anyway, especially after you got back that first week of July. We were together a lot. Chad and I didn't see you at all when you were home. So you were screwing him while I was offshore? Working my ass off so we could have that house, that car? Was that it, Sarah? Getting back at me for being gone? Or were you just? I almost called her a whore, but bit the words back. What was it, Sarah? Was he better? I already knew the answer, but I had to hear her say it. She shook her head, frantic now. No, that's not. I don't know, okay? It was just sex. Just when you were gone. We went to his place, a few nights a week. We were careful. I never stayed over, and at work, we were just colleagues. Never left early, nothing like that. I always parked in his garage, so no one would see. He was just there for you. When I wasn't. Fun, that's how you described it, right? My voice was dangerously low. It wasn't to get back at you, Mark, really. It was, for me. I was lonely. You know how I like to have a good time. And Chad, he was. Charming? Attentive? I supplied, the words tasting like acid in my mouth. He made me feel good. She finished lamely. He convinced me, or maybe I convinced myself, that it didn't matter. That you'd never know. And I was yours, Mark. When you were home. That last part stung the most. It didn't matter how many times she said it, how many excuses she made. She might have been mine when I was around, but the rest of the time, she belonged to him. If you were only mine when I was home, then you weren't really mine at all. Were you? I kept my voice level, my stare steady. You were my wife, Sarah, but... The word caught in my throat. You were someone else's whore. The words hung in the air between us. You were so careful, weren't you? Until you got pregnant. Didn't think that far ahead, did you? What if, down the line, I found out our kid, our oldest, wasn't mine? Wrong blood type, didn't look like the others. And that's assuming you didn't pull this crap again. Let some other guy knock you up, or go crawling back to Chad for another round. Sarah shook her head violently. No, I'd never. I swore, after Chloe, never again. And I knew, once you held her, really held her, you could never leave her. Look at you, Mark, just like Mom said, you were already so invested. Invested? Chad put you up to that, didn't he? You said he called yesterday, to check on you. Really, to make sure I was still in the dark, and to coach you on how to handle me, my reaction. Sarah started twisting her hands together, a nervous habit I hated. We might have talked about it. The thing is, Mark, I was invested. I wanted to be a dad, remember? Both moms had noticed, I hadn't gone near him. Not once. Hadn't held him, changed him, couldn't even look at her for too long without my stomach twisting. I would have. If the DNA test, if it's mine, I'll try. For him. Be honest, Sarah, did it ever even matter to you? Whether it was me or Chad? Her answer didn't surprise me one bit. Of course I wanted it to be you. But, after I found out, I wanted her. I knew she'd be beautiful, and that you'd love her, never suspect a thing. You and Chad aren't that different, really. Same build, hair color. You'd be her dad, that's all that mattered. And I guess that made it easier for you, knowing I was cutting back on the offshore work. You're welcome, by the way. Giving up the bonus pay, working more from the office. You were glad I was home more, or so it seemed. If my being gone was such a hardship, Sarah, you could have just said something. All you had to do was ask. Well, you've sure been doing everything for me, haven't you? She spat the words at me. Yeah, well, that's gonna change. If I'm not this baby's father, it's back to the rigs for me. I'll work there until I find a woman who wants to be with me, all of me. One who can keep her vows, and keep her legs closed when I'm not around. The tears started up again, but I didn't care. But I need you, to help me with the baby. We're a family. What about us, Mark? We've been good these past few months, I've been the perfect wife. I haven't even looked at another man. We can go to counseling, fix this. Us? I don't know if there is an us anymore, Sarah. We'll figure something out, if I'm the father. I looked her dead in the eye. But I won't be around until those DNA results come back. I've already moved my stuff out. Most of it, anyway. That got her attention. The tears stopped. Moved out? Where? Got an apartment. Last week. Figured I'd wait until after the baby came. Trish can stay with you, and Mom can help out too. I know what she's hoping for, praying this'll be her grandson. I turned to leave. Sarah started crying again, softer this time, more heartbroken than angry. I almost ran into Mom and Trish on the way out. They were trying to be subtle, but I could tell they'd been listening at the door. Yeah, I was eavesdropping, sue me. Trish snapped, her eyes red-rimmed but her voice hard. Don't go too far, Mark. Maybe you can work this out. Especially if a child. Oh, you were listening, were you? My voice was tight with anger, barely controlled. Did you catch the part where she doesn't even regret it? Not one bit? Just that I was gone, that it wasn't fair to her? Doesn't even faze her that I might not be the father. She just expects me to clean up her mess, no questions asked. Well, that's not happening. This is pure evil. Trish just stared at me, her own anger replaced by shock, then tears welling up again. Mom put a hand on her arm, trying to calm her down. We walked out to the parking lot, and Mom started unbuckling the car seat. I'm packing a bag, staying with them for a few days. Even if you're not the father. Chloe's been like a daughter to me for 6 years. I can't just abandon her. Don't get me wrong, Mark. I don't condone this. What she did, it's unforgivable. If she wasn't holding that baby right now, well, Trish and I would probably both slap some sense into her. They asked where I was staying, and I gave them the address of the apartment. Didn't mention I'd already talked to a lawyer, moved money around, canceled credit cards, put a freeze on our investments. Couldn't touch 'em without a court order now. Lawyer said we could file for adultery, but honestly, that didn't matter much in this state. Figured Sarah would be stuck at home for a bit, recovering, but that didn't mean she couldn't clean me out online if she got the crazy idea. Better safe than sorry. 99% sure our marriage was done. That last 1%, that was the part of me that remembered being so damn happy just a week ago. But I couldn't let myself think like that anymore. Had to throw that 1% in the trash where it belonged. Sarah had torched my trust, burned it to the ground. Called Scott on the drive home. Well, to my new place. Needed a drinking buddy, and he was the only one who'd understand. I'd taken a few weeks off after Chloe was born, the male version of maternity leave, helping Sarah settle in. Now, being alone sounded pretty damn good, but not tonight. Luckily, Scott could usually slip away from his father-in-law's business during the day. We met up at this dive bar he liked. Figured he wouldn't be working there much longer after Chelsea's confession. So, you ran into Sarah, huh? He asked, as soon as I sat down. I nodded, filling him in on the whole ugly scene. Yeah, we talked to the same lawyer, turns out. Scott took a swig of his beer. Lucky thing Chelsea's dad made me get that prenup, Wanted to protect his company. She owns some stock, but no voting rights, just a formality to keep things legal. She gets to keep that, but I get pretty much everything else. Figured Sarah would get half our stuff, like we talked about. We both worked, she made good money. It was a decent chunk of change, not gonna lie. Hoping I can make a case against alimony, though. Maybe Trish can help with that. Child support only matters if the kid's mine, and I'm not so sure anymore. The courts are gonna screw you over, man. Even though you're the one who got screwed over. Scott said, shaking his head. Larry and I went to see David, the other husband. Told him about our wives and Chad. Scott said, his face grim. Yeah, it almost went south real fast. Dan, being a cop, kept his cool, but warned him not to do anything stupid. Agreed with him there. David was pissed. Couldn't believe we'd let Chad get away with it. Called us pussies for not kicking his ass the second we found out. Dan surprised me, though. Said, who said anything about letting him get away with it? Scott chuckled. Told him the same thing I told you. Don't do anything stupid. Chad's not worth going to jail for. David's got a temper, but he's not stupid. Scott said. He just said, so I gotta make damn sure I don't get caught when someone takes Chad out. We joked about it for a bit, calmed him down enough to sit tight. We gotta do something about this guy. Scott said, his voice serious. Chad needs to be taken down, but it has to be done right. And as much as I'd like to see him lose those balls of his, that's not the way to go. I told him about Chad calling Sarah, pretending to check on her and the baby, when really, he just wanted to make sure his secrets were safe. Scott just stared at me. You're kidding, right? You can't let him get away with this. If he is the father, he's gotta pay up. And he's gotta answer for what he did, to all of us. You, me, David. Dan's talking about moving in with Lauren for now. They've got 2 kids, and it's complicated. Depends on how she acts when he goes home tonight. Says he's only holding back because of you. Chad will figure out his game's up soon enough, once those women start warning each other. He won't be sticking around here for long. Problem is, he's got a knack for getting found. I said, thinking about all the stories I'd heard. People don't realize how hard it is to disappear, really disappear. Especially if you want to make any real money. Can't exactly work under the table when you're pulling in what Chad does. Mark, trust me, his goose is cooked. But, we know about 4 women. There's gotta be others. Like finding needles in a haystack. You find 4 in one handful? The whole damn thing is full of him. We need to find those other husbands. The ones who don't know yet. The ones who'll be just as pissed as we are. Scott started laughing then, a slow chuckle that turned into a full-on belly laugh. I knew he was starting to come around. You're thinking what I'm thinking, aren't you? I asked. He grinned. Oh, I already talked to Dan and David. Just like you figured, Chad pulled that same discretion crap on their wives too. Spilled the beans about the other women to try and impress them. We got names, and we know who to call. He pulled out his phone, dialed up Dan and David right there in the bar. 2 days later, I was back at the house. Well, the house Sarah and I used to share. Trish opened the door, her face drawn. You didn't waste any time, did you? She sounded bitter. Papers were served this morning. She hasn't stopped crying since. Only time she seems like herself is when she's with Chloe, feeding her, rocking her. Not that I blame you, Mark. But, I thought maybe you'd wait. She's taking this hard. After this, well, I doubt she'll even look at another man. You think there's any hope? For counseling? For us? Her voice cracked on the last word. I shook my head. I knew, deep down, there was no going back. Not this time. This pretty much seals it, Trish. I held out the envelope. The DNA results. It's not mine. Unless she's been seeing someone else, Chad's the father. She should go after him for child support. Trish stared at the envelope, then her face crumpled. I could practically hear her heart breaking. All those hopes, those dreams of being a grandma, gone. I hugged her, one last time, and she turned to go break the news to Sarah. I'd already told Mom. She was devastated about not being a grandma, heartbroken for me. Said she was staying put until the DNA results came back. Too angry at Sarah to be under the same roof. Just another casualty in Chad's wake. The whole Chad Anderson saga became the talk of the town for the next few weeks. Once Scott, Dan, David, and I compared notes, we didn't hold back. Didn't matter if people called us names, we made sure everyone knew what that bastard had done. That our wives were victims of his lies, his charm. Turns out, all it took was spreading the word. Seems Chad's little confession trick had backfired. The other women he'd been with, they'd just gone along with it. Whatever their reasons, they'd bought into Chad's act, enjoyed the ride. Until their husbands found out. Then the shit really hit the fan. Guys were demanding paternity tests left and right, questioning their wives, going to therapy. Turns out Chad had a few more kids out there than he'd bargained for. The extent of it all, though, didn't come out until Chad himself spilled his guts. To the cops, no less. You'd think a guy living like that, he'd be smart enough to keep his assets liquid, ready to bolt at a moment's notice. But instead of cash, stocks, anything easy to move, he'd sunk it all into that house, a bunch of rental properties. Even the furniture was fancy, artwork on the walls, the whole 9 yards. Plus, the typical, man of the people, crap. Top-of-the-line fishing and hunting gear, a boat custom-rigged for both water skiing and fishing. Figured he was untouchable. Law enforcement might not have cared much, but once word got out, it wouldn't matter how much money he'd stashed away. He'd have to disappear completely. And that's not easy, not when you need a social security number for any decent job that pays real money. No matter how far you run, some things follow you. Chad, he just didn't get it. Underestimated the rage of a bunch of husbands he'd made fools of. Figured he could stick around, ride it out. He was wrong. Just a few days after his little empire of lies crumbled, someone found him on the sidewalk in front of his house. Some lady went out for a morning jog. He was barely conscious, groaning, in shock. She called 911, but there wasn't much she could do. Couldn't cut the zip ties holding his arms behind his back. Tried to roll him over, but he screamed in pain. Whatever they'd done to him, it wasn't pretty. He never saw who did it. Just remembered answering the door. Sometime that night, or maybe early morning. It was dark, he'd been asleep. Stun gun, I think. He told the cops later. 2 guys, maybe? Couldn't tell, I was out of it. All I remember is one of them saying, "You'll never touch another man's wife again." Chad was pissed, wanted the guys caught, charged, the whole 9 yards. So he gave the cops a list. Every woman he'd been with, married, single, didn't matter. Turns out, it was a long list. So many names, so many alibis to check. The cops were stumped. Lots of suspects, no real proof. Dan told Scott and me later that the detectives figured Chad got what was coming to him. Justice served, off the books. The investigation went nowhere. No surprise there. After a few months, the whole thing just faded away, another unsolved case. Sarah got half of everything. The house sold, some other family moved in. I wondered if their little girl liked the animal murals I'd painted in the nursery. Sarah moved back in with Trish, couldn't handle being a single mom on her own. At least she wouldn't be lonely. Not that I cared. One day, she called. To apologize. Trish must have given her a talking to. She didn't say what she was sorry for, exactly. The cheating? Getting knocked up by Chad? Ruining our marriage? I didn't ask. Didn't care. Can we meet? Talk about this? She asked. No. I said. End of discussion. Did you hear what happened to Chad? She asked. Did you have anything to do with it? He got what he deserved. I hung up. We never spoke again. Lawyers handled the rest. I heard she tried to sue Chad for child support. He wouldn't pay a dime willingly, of course. She'd get alimony, eventually, but the legal fees would probably eat up whatever she got. Chad was drowning in lawsuits, liens on all his fancy properties. Medical bills, lawyer fees, child support payments piling up. He'd be lucky to keep a roof over his head, assuming he even kept his job. 18 months later, I was leaning against the railing of the Triton 7, out in the Gulf. 3 a.m. The wind was sharp and cold, even through my jacket. This was one of my last rotations out here. I'd met someone special, worth taking a chance on. Didn't know if it would work out, but I was gonna damn well try. Time to take that onshore job they'd offered me, the one I'd turned down twice before. I unbuttoned my jacket, felt the weight of it in my pocket. A heavy lump I'd carried for too long. Tried to throw it away a dozen times, but I never could. Stupid, really, keeping it. Risky. But holding it gave me a sense of control. Like I was taking back my power. Without thinking, I pulled it out. A heavy ball-peen hammer, cold and solid in my hand. And I tossed it into the sea. The end. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.